From the PEP Radio Newsroom, we have the following news updates about the NATO Summit in Ankara. At 6:43 this morning, the Associated Press reported NATO has unveiled billions in arms deals to prove its firepower to Trump. NATO showcased a series of military projects worth billions of dollars in an attempt to persuade President Donald Trump that U.S. allies are converting fresh defense spending into real firepower. It's money well spent, and energized NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte told government ministers and defense industry officials on the sidelines of a summit in Turkey. He was speaking at a defense industry forum billed as NATO's big reveal to the thrum of techno music and a slick video display. Trump, who arrived in Ankara on Tuesday, has branded NATO a paper tiger that would cease to function without American arms and leadership. NATO as an organization does not own any weapons. These are the property of the 32 member countries, but it does have a fleet of 14 AWACS, early warning radar surveillance planes that are about 50 years old, along with some newer surveillance drones. A deal to replace the aging planes was announced Tuesday. Swedish manufacturer Saab will be supplying up to 10 new globalized surveillance aircraft for a 10-nation consortium, Swedish Prime Minister Ulf Kristersson announced. At 6:46 a.m., the Associated Press reported, Turkish foreign minister says defense cooperation checks are actually a liability. Hakan Fidan was warned against restrictions on defense industry cooperation among NATO members on the opening day of the alliance's summit in Ankara. In a social media post, he said trade barriers undermine efficiency and slow response, adding that these constraints have become strategic liabilities. The United States and several European countries have imposed restrictions on selling military and dual-use goods to Turkey in recent years. European defense initiatives must remain fully inclusive of all NATO allies, Fidan said. Mere seconds later, AP reported that Turkish police had detained more than 20 protesters at a demonstration in central Ankara against the NATO summit. Officers raised their riot shields to prevent media from filming and photographing the protest by supporters of left-wing political parties. A legal association said 22 students affiliated with the Turkish Workers' Party and 3 lawyers had been detained. Meanwhile, Czech leaders are divided over NATO spending. The bitterly divided leaders of the Czech Republic traveled separately to Turkey to attend the NATO summit on Tuesday. Populist Prime Minister Andrej Babiš was flying with his foreign minister Petr Machinka and defense minister Jaromír Zuna, while President Petr Pavel followed them separately later. Babiš returned to power after his ANO, or Yes movement, won big in an October election, forming a governing coalition whose agenda includes steering the country away from supporting Ukraine. The country's budget for this year falls short of a NATO target for defense spending, less than 1.8% of GDP, despite pressure from the United States and repeated complaints from the president. Before his departure for Ankara on Tuesday, Babiš said the government would meet at least the minimum of 2% next year, but no increase. Unlike the government, Pavel, a retired army general, is a staunch supporter of Ukraine in its fight against the Russian invasion. The government originally refused to include Pavel in the delegation for the summit and did it only after an intervention from the Constitutional Court. In other news, the Kremlin says it will keep a close watch of the NATO summit. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov said that Moscow was closely watching the NATO summit in Ankara. Asked about Ukraine urging its Western allies to deliver air defense assets, Peskov said that Kyiv's push for more weapons wouldn't prevent Russia from reaching the goals of what the Kremlin calls its special military operation. Asked about the prospects for reaching a peaceful settlement in Ukraine, Peskov told reporters that we maintain contact with the Americans via working-level channels, and we hope that their efforts to steer the situation onto a peaceful track will ultimately succeed. He reaffirmed that the hostilities could end once Kyiv demonstrates goodwill and shows a readiness to make those important decisions that need to be made. Well, not to be outdone, Germany's chancellor wants a signal of strength and unity in Ankara. Chancellor Friedrich Merz stressed before leaving Berlin that his country has doubled its defense spending since 2022. He said that we are not making this effort to do anyone a favor. We are making this effort because it is necessary for our defense, for our security. Merz said that Russia remains a serious threat and is testing our determination every day. He added that it is all the more important that we send a signal of strength and unity in Ankara. Merz said this summit should send the message that we are building a more European NATO so that NATO can remain transatlantic. In his usual belligerent fashion, Trump had his own demand. Trump insists on loyalty. Trump has repeatedly slammed NATO, arguing the U.S. carries more than its fair share of military spending. His grievances have been louder since the Iran war, as he has fumed over the fact that some member countries restricted the use of their bases to U.S. forces during the war and have not helped to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. Pressed last month on what key U.S. allies could do to get back on his good side, Trump responded, "Just be loyal." To be perfectly clear, NATO summits are highly symbolic. The 32 member countries of the world's biggest military alliance will emphasize their unshakable commitment to each other's security, although the transatlantic bond has rarely seemed shakier. Still, the meeting is being organized around the theme of a stronger Europe in a stronger NATO. The Dutch government had their own announcement. The Netherlands announced more and smarter defense spending. The Dutch Defense Ministry says it is investing together with the United Kingdom in new amphibious transport vessels and with other NATO allies in replacing aging AWACS surveillance planes. The government announced the plans on the first day of the NATO summit in Ankara to underscore its commitment to ramping up defense spending. The ministry says the Dutch also are playing a leading role in a European initiative to co-produce and maintain American arms such as Stinger, AMRAAM, and PAC-3 missiles. Defense Minister Dilan Yeşilgöz Tsigerus says the Netherlands and European allies are investing much more in strengthening European defense with extra money, but also by working together smarter. Fortunately, for other NATO attendees, President Trump has one leader who gets to keep him calm. NATO's Trump whisperer is seeking to appease the U.S. leader. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte laid on the flattery with Trump last month, pressing the case for a military alliance that the volatile U.S. leader has sharply criticized as the Pentagon reviews the size of the U.S. military footprint in Europe. Trump has renewed his threats to leave the 77-year-old alliance, but Rutte, who has become known as a Trump whisperer for his ability to charm the president, has taken on the now familiar role of attempting to appease him anew. In still other news, sorry, Bibi, but Trump has some bad news for you. Trump says he's going to consider selling F-35 jets to Turkey. The president was asked by a reporter as he met with Turkish President Erdogan whether he'll allow the sale of the American armed fighter jets to Turkey, which has been banned from the program after purchasing Russian missile defense systems. It's certainly something we will consider, Trump said as he sat with his Turkish counterpart. He said that Turkey has been, in many ways, much more loyal than other countries. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has publicly urged the United States not to sell the jets to Turkey, saying it would upset the balance of power in the Middle East. Well, Rahm Emanuel will assail Netanyahu in Tel Aviv in a speech as American politics shift against Israel. While Trump is in Turkey demanding loyalty from NATO allies, a leading Democrat will be in Tel Aviv, and is there now, directly accusing the president's military partner of driving Israel into a dead end. Potential presidential candidate Rahm Emanuel plans to denounce Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and call for an end to U.S. subsidies of Israel's defense budget in a speech Wednesday at Tel Aviv University. "You've lost Europe," Emanuel will say, according to remarks obtained by the Associated Press, castigating Netanyahu for doing little to end the Iran war. He'll note that support for Israel is plummeting around the world. About 58% of Democrats say the U.S. is too supportive of Israel, according to a new survey by the Associated Press North Center for Public Affairs Research, up from 45% in January 2024. Roughly half of Democrats believe Israel's government has committed genocide against Palestinians during the war in Gaza, an accusation leveled by some human rights organizations and vehemently denied by Israel and the U.S. government. And finally, we close with this news. NATO officials dismiss fears of a Russian attack on alliance members. A senior NATO official speaking on the sidelines of the summit in Ankara on Tuesday said that despite some reckless actions by Russia, including airspace violations over Poland, Romania, and Estonia, he believes the alliance has been successful in deterring Russia from any potential attack on a member country. "I see absolutely no indications whatsoever that Russia is interested in any sort of conflict with NATO," the official said. He said Moscow is overstretched by its war in Ukraine and knows NATO would respond to any attack on a member. "I would say now that Russia is deterred, but Russia is deterred because of the actions that we are taking," he said. That wraps up this report. We'll have part 2 of the coverage from today's NATO summit at 9 p.m. this evening. One of the stories we will cover is Trump reiterating the need for the United States to control Greenland. Stay tuned. From the PEP Radio Newsroom, I'm David Moore.